Guys, welcome back again. This is Claire Meehan, and I will be continuing with our video of keeping up with the Flint water crisis. And like I said before in the introduction, I will be talking about environmental racism and how that actually played a role in the Flint water crisis, as well as defining the term for most of those who haven't necessarily heard it before. So I wanted to clearly define it and how it's used in real world problems like this one. So environmental racism is environmental injustice that occurs in policy within a racialized context. And in other words, it refers to the way in which minority groups are faced with uneven number of environmental hazard pollutions that lower their own quality of life. And when I say minority groups, I think it refers to and directed to people of color or simply people of socioeconomic groups such as lower, middle, and upper classes. And so this played a big role in the Flint water crisis because many residents of the city became angered by the way the government chose to handle the contaminated water, that it struck to certain kinds of people that they were receiving more or less than what they should have compared to others. So just to start off, the drinking water was confirmed to be unsafe to drink because of unclean lead pipes that state workers in the city of Flint were refusing to clean. In a recent article I read, this is called "The Flint Water Crisis Isn't Over" by Kurt Guyette and the American Civil Liberties Union, focuses primarily on the issue of environmental injustice. And the main idea of this source acknowledges how resident officials are still struggling to find solutions to the water problem, or at least those who do live there. They were convinced the water was safe to drink when it really wasn't by government officials, which became a really big problem in the long run. This article was written by a lead investigator of the crisis, addressing the concerns people had about the water and how the environmental team has declared that clear contamination and had no other choice but to continue using water that was laced with high levels of lead. So he talks about how officials are refusing to let residents know the truth about what they've been drinking because they didn't want any legal action taken into accommodation because it would cause further problems. And environmental officials were just as much as part of the problem by telling these people that the water was safe to drink when it actually wasn't. So from this point forward, things began to escalate very quickly for the city of Flint. Hey guys, now I'm back here at the William T. Young Library, and now that I've gotten y'all's attention, I've acknowledged the problem, but I also want to acknowledge the call to actions that have been taken for some of these people here in Flint. So due to the extension of these issues after, many faced discrimination through the environmental racism and even death, these struggles would eventually come to light for people of Flint. And in another article I read that was very important to this matter, proposed by the New York Times, 6 state workers in Flint were criminally charged due to their lack of their role and help contributing to finding clean water for residents. And it talks about how officials were finally starting to pay them for what they had done and by avoiding their responsibilities in the contamination of the water. That started to make long-term effects on some of these people, mentally and physically. So I think this is really important as well because this also goes back to my first source about how residents were treated so poorly, and it explains how state prosecutors were finally charged government workers for their misleading information throughout the whole crisis. So I think now that the government took action, these residents were finally starting to receive some kind of justice for what had been going on for their unclean water and how it was making their living situation so much more to deal with than it really should have been. And it also kind of gave them another reason to stop begging for a change because they finally started to acknowledge what was going on. And even though everything isn't perfect right now in Flint, I think that this is just one big step to finally, giving justice to those who were doing everything that they could to have healthy and clean benefits toward the residents of people and all the people of Flint. I want to show the federal side of this situation, how there was action taken, but it wasn't enough for the community. So in my last source, this backs up my topic the most in my opinion because it adds in a great piece of useful information from Barack Obama declaring a federal state emergency due to the amount of people getting sick so quickly. So produced by Kennedy Merritt, she wrote a story called "The Lead-Laced Water in Flint and Step-by-Step Making of the Crisis." specifically addresses how a majority black city where about 40% of people who lived in poverty, and how state and local officials denied a problem with the water for months, only continuing to make matters worse for the people of Flint. But I want to clearly say how this represents how you must stick to a solution when it's a problem this big, especially a worldwide problem, because Flint wasn't the only city that had unclean water to drink. So avoiding an exposure like this is a key part to how environmental racism was playing a role in Flint because of other things that had been going on. But it played a huge role in a part of it because people needed to be more informed about it, because as a community, receiving the same attention and healthcare towards everyone will only build a stronger community. And I think it's most important because of a desperate time like this.